Sparkling wine has always been the wine of celebration. It is made all over the world and goes from the cheap and cheerful to the exceedingly rare and expensive. More usual and popular is the cuve clos or Charmat method. A base wine of around 10% alcohol is created. This is then pumped into a tank to which small amounts of yeast and sugar are added. The tank is sealed, and over the next 14 days the yeast will attack the sugar, creating carbon dioxide which becomes trapped within the wine. At the same time, a sediment of dead yeasts and other matter is created. These yeast cells will then be filtered out, and the wine will be bottled under pressure to retain its sparkle. It is simple and cheap, but the sediment has only the minimum time in contact with the wine, with limited flavour pickup. Cuve clos is responsible for almost all of Germany's Sekt, as well as many of the world's leading branded sparkling wines. A variation of the cuve clos is used to make Asti in northern Italy. Here, preserving the freshness of the Moscato grape is all important. The must is kept chilled until needed, and then fermented in sealed tanks. The fermentation is halted at around 6%. A small amount of sugar is then added to increase the alcohol by 1.5 to 2%, and the fermentation continues in a sealed tank until it reaches 7.5% of alcohol, when the fermentation is terminated by sterile filtration and the wine bottled with a high level of residual sugar. Another way of making sparkling wine is known as the transfer method. The base wine is placed in a cellar bottle rather than a tank. The yeast and sugar are added, the bottle sealed, and the second fermentation takes place. The wine stays in the bottle in contact with the sediment before being transferred into a tank under pressure. It is then run off through a filter into a conventional sparkling wine bottle. This process allows for a slower second fermentation with greater pickup of yeast flavours and is used widely in Australia. The traditional method, which is now used all over the world, was developed in Champagne. The vineyards here are amongst the most northerly in mainland Europe. The grapes are normally picked in October, roughly 100 days after the flowering of the vines, whose roots go deep into chalk. The cool climate here in northern France preserves the acidity in the grapes, an essential factor in creating a good quality base wine. The pickers will need 2 or 3 weeks of continuous good weather to bring in the harvest. Champagne is made from Chardonnay, blended with the Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. The whole region, strictly delimited by law, is just 30,000 hectares. At its heart is the valley of the River Marne. The south-facing chalky slopes which rise above it are open to the exposure of the summer sun. Here the black Pinot Meunier grapes produce honest, fruity wines, which are attractive and easy to drink. To the north of the River Marne lies the Montagne de Reims and the town itself. Ideal slopes for the black Pinot Noir, a high-quality grape that provides the wine with backbone, strength and fullness. Villages here like Verzenay, crowned by its historic mill, produce some of Champagne's best wines. To the south, surrounding the town of Epernay, are the vineyards of the Côte des Blancs, famous for Chardonnay, which gives Champagne its freshness, elegance and lightness. To the south of the Côte des Blancs lies the Aube, which produces sound wines mainly used in non-vintage blends. As soon as they're picked, the bunches of grapes are taken to be pressed as quickly as possible before fermentation can start. These round wooden presses have been used in Champagne for more than 200 years. Each load of grapes will be pressed several times. The yield from the grapes is controlled by law. From every 160 kilograms, only the first 100 litres of juice can be made into Champagne. Of this 100 litres, the first 80 litres, called the cuvée, is the finest and is used in the best champagnes. The balance of 20 litres is called the taille. After the pressing comes the fermentation, the conversion of the sugar in the juice into alcohol. 1 or 2 houses still ferment their wines in wood. The juice from each village, each pressing, and each of the 3 separate grape varieties is put into 200-litre casks, ideally made of oak from Hungary. Painted on the face of each cask are 2 letters to indicate the vineyard from where the grapes came. However, nowadays most champagne is fermented in stainless steel vats. The Champagne region embraces over 200 classified villages or crus, each rated in ascending order of excellence. The top vineyards are the Grand and Premier Cru. Each house has its own style. After the vintage, the larger houses may have up to 150 different cru and 600 vats to choose from. The blending is in 2 stages. First, they will create wines from one grape variety in one area. From these carefully made pre-blends, they move on to the final assembly. The tasters have a very clear picture in their minds of what style of wine they wish to achieve. They are aiming to assemble a blend that in 3 years' time or more will exactly match the wine being drunk today. Light, golden in colour, with an attractive bouquet and a lively, fresh taste. The very best wines will go into prestige blends, or if it is an outstanding year, they will form vintage champagne. A certain amount of reserve wine is kept back for future years to allow the blenders to maintain the style of the house. After the blend has been made, the wine is bottled, and at the same time a dose of yeast and sugar is added. This will stimulate the vital secondary fermentation, which will create the carbonic bubbles that give the sparkle to champagne. Over the next few months, as the wine lies in the chill chalk caves 150 feet below ground, the yeast will feed on the sugar, and the fizz will form. The bottles are then allowed to age for a minimum period by law of 15 months for non-vintage, 3 years for vintage, to allow the yeasts to impart their flavours to the wine. As the wine ages, sediments appear which will eventually be ingeniously removed. To get the sediment down into the neck of the bottles are placed into what look like easels. They're called pupitres. Every day they are rotated until they're in an upright position. There are 2 sediments, one heavy and sticky, the other light and dusty. The secret is to let the heavier sediment attach itself to the lighter, flakier sediment, so that both are brought carefully down onto the cork. If you just turned a bottle upside down, most of the light sediment would remain suspended in the wine, and you would never be able to remove it. After numerous nudges over a period of weeks, the bottles are almost upright, and the sediment sits in the neck, ready for removal. A skilled remover can turn up to 30,000 bottles in a day, but today more and more companies are turning to computer-controlled gyropalettes, which normally hold more than 500 bottles, which are turned automatically to achieve the same result. When the sediment has settled on the cap, the wine is ready to go through a process called the dégorgement, or disgorging. The bottle is dunked into an icy bath of brine, which freezes the sediment into a solid plug. The crown cap is removed, and the pressure in the bottle, at 6 atmospheres, the equivalent to the tire pressure of a 30-ton truck, expels the plug like a bullet. The bottle is then topped up with a special dosage, a mixture of old wine and syrup. Many of the smaller houses still do this by hand. The actual amount added will dictate whether the wine is brut, sec, or demi-sec. This dosage plays an important part in creating the champagne house's style. The marriage of bottle and cork and the development of a unique blending process were achieved at the end of the 17th century at the Abbey of Auvillers, in the heart of the Champagne region. It was the inspired work of a Benedictine monk, Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon was among the first to realize that by pressing black grapes swiftly, white juice could be extracted, because the color lies in the skin, not the flesh. He realized too that by blending wines and grapes from different areas, a wine of far greater quality could be achieved. This blending technique is the essence of champagne making. But he also carried his researches out into the vineyards. He realized that it was the quality of the vines themselves which determined the style of the wine. Today, the bottle should be chilled. The top of the gold foil should be removed, the wire muzzle eased off, and then a gentle twisting motion will ease the cork out, not with a pop, but with a scarcely audible sigh. Pour a little champagne. The glasses must be clean. Detergent deposits can flatten the wine. Ideally, it should be drunk from plain glasses, either tulip or flute-shaped, which enhance the bouquet and allow the bubbles to stream gently to the surface.